Max, move! You're hurting him! I screamed, lunging for the retired canine's collar as he pinned my 4-year-old against the hallway wall. I thought my dog had finally snapped, until I saw him braced against the door, his eyes locked on the repairman on our porch. That was the second the man reached for the handle, and I realized Max wasn't attacking my son. He was shielding him from a monster I was about to let inside. I didn't understand what that meant at the time. I only know that if you've ever had a dog react before you did, you'll probably recognize the moment I'm about to describe. If something like this has ever happened to you, tell me in the comments. And if you want to hear how it ended, stay with me. I'm going to tell this carefully, the way it actually happened. It wasn't dramatic at first, no alarms, no shouting. Just an ordinary afternoon. My child was in the living room quietly playing on the floor. I was in the kitchen, half focused, doing the kind of things you do on autopilot when everything feels safe. The dog was lying near the hallway, old, gray around the muzzle, retired. He used to be a canine. That's what they told us when we adopted him years ago, but by now he was just our dog, slow to stand, gentle, content to sleep through most of the day. No vest, no commands, no job. Then there was a knock, not loud, not urgent, just a normal knock on the front door. I remember thinking I'd answer it in a second, but the dog stood up, not fast, not startled, slow, deliberate. He walked past me and stopped directly in front of the door. He didn't look back at me, didn't bark, didn't wag his tail. He just stared at the door. The knock came again. Closer, heavier. That was the moment something shifted in the room. That tight feeling in your chest before your mind catches up. I said his name softly, out of habit. He didn't turn. The door handle moved, and the dog lowered his head, not in fear, in readiness. That's when I realized this wasn't a pet reacting. This was training resurfacing, instinct waking up. And whatever was on the other side of that door, he had already decided it wasn't coming inside. The dog didn't bark. That's the part that still stays with me. The handle on the door moved again, slow this time, like someone testing how far it would go. The dog pressed his chest against the door, solid and unmoving, his paws planted wide like he was bracing for impact. "Hello?" the man said. His voice was calm, casual, too calm. "Maintenance," he added. "Just need to come in for a minute." I hadn't called anyone. My brain knew that, but my body lagged behind, stuck in that frozen half-second where you're still trying to make sense of what you're hearing. The dog let out a low sound, not a growl, more like a warning rumble that never fully formed. "Sir," I said, my voice thinner than I expected, "what unit are you here for?" There was a pause, long enough to feel wrong. "Yours," he said finally. "Pipe issue downstairs." The dog shifted his weight, shoulders tightening. I could see the line of his back stiffen, the way it does right before a storm breaks. Behind me, I heard soft footsteps. My child. She'd wandered into the hallway without a sound, clutching a small toy, eyes fixed on the door with open curiosity. Before I could turn, the dog moved. He stepped sideways, deliberately blocking her path. His body formed a wall between her and the door, never taking his eyes off the handle. "Hey," the man said, irritation creeping into his voice. "Control your dog." I didn't answer. The dog reached back with his shoulder and gently nudged my child away from the door. Not forceful, not frightening, just enough to redirect her, like he'd done it 1,000 times before. "Come here," I said quickly, reaching for her. The handle twisted again. Harder. The dog exploded into motion. One sharp bark, loud, final. It echoed through the house like a dropped plate. "Oh," the man muttered, stumbling back a step. The dog slammed his weight into the door from the inside. Front paws braced, teeth bared now, his entire body vibrating with contained force. I rushed forward and flipped the lock. My hands shaking so badly I missed it the first time. Footsteps retreated, fast. I didn't move for several seconds after the porch went quiet. I just stood there, my child pressed against my chest, listening to my own heartbeat thunder in my ears. The dog stayed in front of the door, watching. Only when I slid the deadbolt into place did he finally step back. "That was a good boy," I whispered, barely realizing I'd said it. Good boy. His tail didn't wag. The rest of the afternoon passed in fragments. I checked the windows, locked them, closed the curtains even though it was still light outside. I told myself I was overreacting, that nothing actually happened. But the dog didn't lie down again. He followed my child everywhere. When she toddled toward the kitchen, he shadowed her steps. When she sat on the floor to play, he positioned himself between her and the hallway. At one point, she reached for the front door again, drawn by something shiny on the handle. The dog barked once, sharp, immediate. I spun around just in time. "Oh my God," I said, scooping her up. "Thank you. Thank you." I rubbed his head, trying to calm him, but his eyes stayed fixed on the door, ears angled forward, listening for something I couldn't hear. Later, as I carried laundry past the stairs, my child lost her footing near the top step. She slipped. The dog lunged. He wedged his body between her and the edge, bracing himself as she grabbed onto his fur and steadied. She laughed. I didn't. My knees went weak as I rushed forward, pulling her back, my hands shaking now for a different reason. "Good boy," I said again, my voice breaking. "You're such a good boy." That was the second time that day he'd intervened before I could, and somewhere deep in my chest, a cold realization began to settle. This wasn't coincidence. This was vigilance. That night, as I tucked my child into bed, the dog lay down across the doorway instead of his usual spot. I almost told him to move. Almost, but I didn't. I turned off the light and stood there for a moment, watching his silhouette in the dim glow of the hallway. Still, alert, waiting. And for the first time since that knock on the door, I whispered something I didn't even know I believed yet. "Thank you for watching her." By the next morning, I told myself the danger had passed. That's what people do. They smooth the edges of fear so they can function. The house looked the same in daylight. The door was intact, the porch empty. No sign that anyone had ever been there, but the dog hadn't reset. He didn't return to his old routines. Didn't nap in the sun. Didn't wander off to his usual corner. He stayed close to my child, too close to ignore. When she sat at the table for breakfast, he lay down beside her chair, his body angled outward, eyes tracking every sound in the house. When I moved around the kitchen, he watched me, but when she shifted, even slightly, his attention snapped back to her. I tried to laugh it off. "He's being clingy today," I said aloud, mostly to reassure myself. The dog didn't react. Mid-morning, I stepped into the laundry room, just a few steps away. Door open, line of sight clear. That's when I heard him bark. Once. Urgent. I turned. My child had toddled toward the back door, one hand already reaching for the handle. Before I could say her name, the dog crossed the room and blocked her path, placing his body between her and the door. Head low, stance firm. "Hey," I said, startled. "It's okay." He didn't move. I pulled her back gently, my heart thudding harder than it should have. "Good boy," I murmured, rubbing his shoulder. "Thank you." That made three. 3 times he'd stepped in before I even understood there was a risk. By early afternoon, I stopped trying to redirect him. I let him follow, let him watch, let him stand guard. Because every time I started to relax, he'd stiffen again, ears up, body angled toward a sound I barely noticed. A car door outside, footsteps on the sidewalk, a shadow passing the window. Nothing ever came of it, but he never assumed that meant nothing could. Later that day, a package was dropped at the front door. The knock was light, normal. The dog went rigid instantly. Before I could reach the hallway, he was there, blocking the door, teeth bared just slightly, a low, warning rumble vibrating in his chest. "It's okay," I said, though my voice didn't sound convinced. "It's just a delivery." The knock came again. He barked, loud enough that the person outside stepped back. "I'll leave it here," a voice called. I waited until the footsteps faded before opening the door. The dog didn't move until the door was closed again. "You're doing a lot today," I whispered, kneeling beside him. "Aren't you tired?" He rested his head briefly against my leg, then lifted it again, watching. That evening, while I was distracted on the phone, my child wandered toward the stairs. I didn't notice until I heard the sound of claws skidding across the floor. The dog sprinted past me and planted himself sideways at the top step, blocking her completely. He stood there, unmoving, until I reached them and scooped her up. "Oh my God," I said, breathless. "You scared me." I hugged her tight, then reached down and wrapped my arms around the dog's neck. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick now. "Thank you so much." That night, after she fell asleep, the house finally went quiet. Too quiet. I lay in bed listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sounds of traffic, the soft rhythm of my child's breathing through the monitor. The dog lay on the floor beside the bed, not sleeping. I could tell by the way his ears twitched, the way his head lifted every time a sound shifted. Sometime after midnight, I heard it. Footsteps. Slow. Careful. Too close to be accidental. The dog rose silently and moved to the window, standing between it and the bed. He didn't bark. He stared. The footsteps paused. My heart hammered so loudly I was sure it could be heard outside. Then they moved away. I didn't breathe until the sound was gone. The next morning, I called the property management office. I tried to keep my voice steady as I explained the knock, the man, the claim about repairs. There was a pause on the other end. "We didn't send anyone," the woman said. "No maintenance requests, no work orders." My stomach dropped. I thanked her and hung up, sinking into a chair. The dog came over and rested his head on my knee. For the first time in 2 days, his tail wagged. Just once. "You knew," I whispered, staring at the floor. "You knew before I did." He looked up at me, calm now, as if the question had already been answered. And that was when it became clear. This wasn't random. This wasn't anxiety. This was a pattern. And he wasn't reacting to danger anymore. He was anticipating it. After that call, everything changed, but quietly. Not in the way you'd expect. There were no sirens, no official reports taped to the door. No neighbors knocking to ask questions. Just a subtle narrowing of the world. It became about one dog and one child. The dog stopped watching the house as a whole and started watching her. Wherever she went, he positioned himself so he could see her face. If she sat on the floor, he lay down a few feet away, body angled outward. If she stood, he stood. If she moved rooms, he followed at a distance that felt deliberate, close enough to intervene, far enough not to crowd her. He never touched her unless he had to. That was the part that struck me. Every movement he made was measured, controlled, as if he was constantly calculating angles and timing, weighing whether action was necessary. He wasn't anxious. He was on duty. One afternoon, she fell asleep on the couch with a blanket half draped over her legs. The dog sat beside her the entire time, eyes half closed but never fully resting. I remember whispering, "You can lie down," as if he'd understand. He didn't. Later, I tried to coax him outside while she napped. He stepped onto the porch, turned around once, and went straight back inside. He lay down on the floor next to the couch, watching. At night, he stopped sleeping in his old spot completely. He slept outside her door, not curled up, not relaxed, straight-backed, alert, facing outward. If she stirred in her sleep, he lifted his head. If she cried out from a dream, he was on his feet before I was fully awake. I stopped questioning it. I stopped trying to redirect him. Because every time I did, he'd glance at me briefly, then look back at her, like he was reminding me what mattered. One evening, I sat on the floor and watched them together. She was stacking blocks, humming to herself. He lay nearby, chin resting on his paws, eyes tracking her movements with soft intensity. That's when it hit me. He wasn't guarding a space. He was guarding a life. The realization settled heavy in my chest. I thought about his age, his gray muzzle, the way he moved slower now. And yet, whenever it mattered, he moved fast enough. I remembered the way he'd planted himself in front of the door, the way he'd blocked the stairs, the way he'd intercepted her steps again and again. Always before I noticed, always without command. One night, while brushing my teeth, I heard him shift position suddenly. I froze. Then I heard it too, a soft sound outside. Not footsteps this time, something lighter, a rustle, a pause. The dog moved into the hallway, placing himself between the bedroom and the front of the house. He didn't bark. He stood there, listening. Seconds stretched. Then nothing. He returned to his spot by her door and lay down. Just like that. I stared at him for a long time after. In that quiet moment, something in me broke open, not fear, but understanding. This wasn't a phase, this wasn't overreaction. He believed the threat wasn't gone. And more importantly, he believed she was still vulnerable. From that point on, I adjusted everything around them. I kept doors locked, curtains drawn, lights on at night. But mostly I trusted him. If he stiffened, I paid attention. If he barked, I responded. If he blocked, I didn't argue. Because he had earned that trust again and again without ever asking for it. The world outside our house felt smaller now, more focused, more dangerous. Inside, there was only one constant, a retired dog, a sleeping child, and a quiet promise he seemed determined to keep, that nothing would reach her, not if he could stop it. It happened in the quietest moment. That's usually how it does, late afternoon. The light outside starting to soften, the kind of hour where nothing dramatic is supposed to happen. My child was in the living room, sitting on the rug, flipping through a picture book. I was in the kitchen, rinsing a cup, half listening to the familiar sounds of pages turning. The dog was lying near her, not asleep. I could tell by the way his ears were angled, by the tension still held in his shoulders. He never fully relaxed anymore. Not since the knock, not since the footsteps at night. Then everything stopped. No pages turning, no humming, no movement. I looked up. The dog was standing, completely still. He wasn't facing her. He was facing the back door. For a second, I didn't hear anything. I almost dismissed it until I noticed the silence itself, the absence of the usual background note. Then I heard it, a soft click, the unmistakable sound of a handle being tested. My heart dropped into my stomach. I turned the corner just in time to see the back door open a few inches, and a man standing just outside, different clothes than before. Baseball cap pulled low, but the same eyes. There was a pause, a terrible, suspended moment where no one moved. My child stood up, confused, curious. She took one small step toward the door. That's when the dog moved. He launched forward with everything he had left, not barking at first, not hesitating. He slammed into the door, driving it shut with his body, forcing the man backward off the step. The sound was loud, wood striking wood, claws scraping, a sharp grunt of surprise. The man stumbled. The dog didn't chase, he blocked. He planted himself squarely between the door and my child, body low, legs braced, barking now, deep, relentless, impossible to ignore. I screamed, not words, just sound. I grabbed my child and pulled her to my chest as the man scrambled backward, swearing, panic finally cracking through his calm. "Get that dog!" he shouted. Neighbors' doors opened. Someone yelled. The man turned and ran. I didn't watch him leave. I was already on my knees. The dog stood there for several seconds longer, barking into empty air, making sure the threat was gone. Then his legs buckled. He sank to the floor, panting hard, sides heaving. I crawled to him, still shaking, still holding my child with one arm. "Oh my God," I sobbed. "You saved my baby." I pressed my face into his fur. "Thank you," I whispered over and over. "Thank you, thank you." My child reached out and touched his ear, gentle and unaware of how close everything had come. "It's okay," I told her, my voice breaking. "He's here." The dog lifted his head once and licked my hand. Just once. Then he lay down. The police came, statements were taken, neighbors talked in hushed voices. Someone mentioned seeing a man around the block before. Someone else mentioned a similar incident a few streets over. None of it mattered in that moment. All that mattered was the key lying on the floor. Still breathing, still here. That night, I didn't put him back in his usual bed. I laid a blanket beside my child's bed, and he slept there instead. For the first time since all of this began, he slept deeply. No pacing, no listening, no watching, just rest. In the days that followed, things slowly settled. The lock stayed changed. The routine returned. The house felt like a home again. The dog didn't guard every doorway anymore, but he still lay near her, still watched her play, still lifted his head whenever she moved. And every time I looked at him, I felt something tighten in my chest. Because I knew, if you're still here listening to this, if this story made you pause even once, if you believe like I do now, that dogs see danger before we do, please don't forget this one. Subscribe so you don't miss stories like this. Because some guardians don't wear badges. They don't ask for credit. And they don't get second chances. They just stand up when it matters. And when the world finally goes quiet again, they lie down at your feet. He doesn't sleep by the door anymore. He sleeps where her breathing is, because that's the sound he fought to protect. If this story stayed with you, if you felt that moment when instinct moved faster than fear, then you already understand why these stories matter. Subscribe so these quiet heroes don't go unheard. And tell us in the comments, has a dog ever protected someone you love?